Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Let's see, do we have, since I can't see everybody, maybe let's talk about who's present and who's not present. I understand that, is Dr. Lou there?
No, he's not. This is Larry
Okay.
McCallum and Judy Mitchell. We're both here.
All right, very good. And we, Supervisor Nelson hasn't arrived as of yet, but
No.
quorum, so we will call to order the Mobile Source Committee meeting of September 16, 2016. Let the record reflect that Ms. Mitchell, Mrs. McCollum is present, and we will go right into our agenda. Dr. Fine, I understand you have an extensive update on the AQMP for us this morning.
Excuse me, Dr. Parker, would you like to appoint Dr. Burke to the committee for this morning?
I would, excuse me for not recognizing Dr. Burke, since he's kind of an ex officio member of every one of our committees, but officially he's appointed as a member this morning. Thank you very much, Mrs. Barrett. Dr. Fine, go right ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Good morning, members of the committee. It's my pleasure to present the latest 2016 AQMP update. As you know, we've been coming to this committee for well over a year now on update on progress on the AQMP, and we're thick in the middle of the development, as you all know. Just a little bit of an update. We were dark last month, so it's been 2 months since I briefed the committee. We have released the draft plan and the 4 of the technical appendices 1 through 4, were publicly released in the June and July timeframe. We have also released the preliminary draft socioeconomic report partially. It's consisting of chapters 1 through 3. Chapter 2 deals with the costs of the plan, and Chapter 3 deals with the benefits of the plan. We are still working very hard on the full economic model that looks at the regional impacts and the jobs foregone and the other benefits. So that is underway, and we hope to release that by the end of this month, at least have some of those results available. As we said, everything is available.
Dr. Fine, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
May I ask you a question? Do you prefer that we wait to ask questions, or as we're going along so we don't have to come back, since the presentation is fairly lengthy, that we ask questions as we go along? And how does the other committee members feel about that? Which way would you prefer?
Whatever the committee feels, asking questions as we go along is perfectly fine, especially as we get into the response to comments. We'll probably discuss each one individually.
Is there any objection to doing that, or waiting to complete, committee members?
No objection here.
No objection.
Okay, go right ahead, Dr. Fine.
All right, so
Doesn't have any objection at all.
okay, so socioeconomic analysis is partially available, the draft. We continue work on that. 2 more technical appendices, 5 and 6. It says here that they were delayed a bit because EPA published a final rule on the PM 2.5 implementation of the PM 2.5 standard, but we did release those this week, so those are now available online. And we have also received comments that I'll talk about today. So most of the work over the past month have been developing revisions to this draft plan in response to the comments, the over 65 comments we've received as of this month. 64 as of our kind of comment deadline of August 19th, but we received a few more since that time as well. So in terms of meeting, we continue to meet with our advisory group on almost a monthly basis. The last meeting was on August 16th. We covered this final EPA rule on implementing the PM 2.5 standard that obviously has impacts on the way we develop the plan, some latest modeling results, and then the socioeconomic analysis results that are in chapters 1 through 3 of that report. We've scheduled the next advisory group meeting at the end of this month. In addition to our normal AQMP advisory group meeting, we also convened the advisory council, which under state law convenes and provides comments on our Appendix 1 of the AQMP. Appendix 1 deals with the health impacts of air pollution. Health and Safety Code requires that to include an analysis of the health impacts of particulate matter in Southern California, and it also requires this advisory council to be convened and provide input to that report. So we had that advisory council on August 18th, and we've received written comments and verbal comments at that meeting, and we're making modifications to Appendix 1 based on that input as we speak, and that will also be released with the revised draft plan. We have had ongoing regional stakeholder meetings and interested party meetings. I've gone out giving presentations on AQMP, probably on average 3 to 5 meetings a week over the past 2 or 3 months. And there's just 25 meetings here, but it's likely much more than that. There was just a couple more this week. So we are doing a lot of outreach and trying to go to the COGS, go to industry groups and environmental groups and community groups and talk about what we're trying to accomplish in the plan. So what I'd like to do is, in those over 65 comment letters, we've received a lot of comments, and we can't go over every single comment in every single letter, but we've tried to group them by topic and capture some of the main comments, and we'd like to just discuss them with the committee. We don't have our potential response here yet because that's still being formulated, but that can also be informed by the discussion here today as we move forward towards a revised draft. So the first set of comments we categorized kind of the overall strategy, the overall approach of the plan. So we did receive support in many comment letters for the approach that we have, which, as you know, relies pretty heavily on incentives. There's a recognition that it's necessary to accelerate the deployment of these zero and near zero equipment and vehicles as soon as possible to meet our air quality targets. We got comments that it will encourage local clean jobs and clean manufacturing, and also comments that there's support for that approach, but we really need to make sure we meet those EPA requirements for quantifiable surplus, enforceable permanent emission reductions with enforceable commitments as well. So those are some challenges that we've talked about in the past, and we continue to work with EPA on that. We have also got comments that we rely too heavily on this incentive-based approach, and that we should be much stronger on the regulatory side. And as part of our presentations, we have talked about how this plan builds upon a strong regulatory approach that has been part of our current regulatory program, past plans, past proposals, and that this plan actually builds upon that with a strong regulatory approach. Despite that, we still have comments that we should go further. The comments are that regulations are more reliable, more enforceable, more useful, provide more assurance towards attainment, that relying on incentives when the funding is not identified or secured or guaranteed is a problem, and that even if the technology is not available as we speak today, that we should consider technology forcing regulations that help technology development in order to meet the standards. And again, that can also help create jobs in the region, healthy businesses, and achieve our goals towards clean air. So I'm happy to stop at any point if anyone has general comments on this overall strategy, or I can move through each category at the committee's pleasure. All right, I'll move on.
Any questions from anyone? Here none, proceed.
We'll wait for public comments until we get through it. Okay, so the next set, we're just drilling down a little bit. Those were the general comments. So just a little bit more on the incentive funding. We are, as you know, developing this funding action plan that we'll be bringing in parallel with the plan, and we've briefed this committee on that before. The comments center around the need for sufficient funding, prioritizing the projects in environmental justice areas, a priority on federal funding, and then comments that streamlined accessible funding programs are very important. We can get all this money, but it's very important when we implement those programs and projects that we make it easy to apply and easy to implement with a lot of outreach and simple voucher programs, et cetera. We have comments on where the funding might be secured. We have comments that local taxpayers and local residents should not bear the financial responsibilities. A lot of comments that, you know, if it's industry that's polluting, that industry should be paying for these incentive programs. Concerns about increases in regulatory fees, that if we don't get the funding from the sources we've mentioned, that we'll have no choice but to increase our regular fees on our regulated businesses. And we have lots of suggestions about where we can get the funding, and we're considering all of these, as you know, including the VW settlement, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, loan programs, grants, and partnerships. We have comments that what happens if we don't, we have.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Dr. Fine, Dr. Burke asked for a clarification of those last three that you just mentioned.
The loans,
You were talking about the sources.
loans, grants, and partnerships. Is that what you're?
No, what settlement are you talking about?
The Volkswagen
What settlement?
The Volkswagen settlement.
Okay.
Now, I remember last time we were talking about that a little bit. Are we going to be able to utilize those dollars in any discretionary manner in which we choose? Or are they going to be specifically, and the reason why I asked that, if that is going to be something that you are directly depending on, Barbara, someone should be very, very careful to make sure that the settlement agreement is so worded that it's not so restrictive that we cannot use it from a general's discretionary standpoint of view. Otherwise, we'll be involved in a lawsuit as to misappropriating or not appropriating, but misusing those funds for the not intended purposes.
Dr. Parker, this is Henry Hogo. Just to give you a little bit more detail on the pending settlement, which is still have to be finalized by the courts. The settlement calls for
Henry, I'm sorry, could you just clarify the settlement parties?
the settlement parties at this point is US EPA and the California Air Resources Board. There are other litigation going on that has not been decided at this time. And the settlement itself is limited to one engine type, the 2-liter diesel engine. There's still litigation on the 3-liter diesel engine, and that's ongoing. But let me go back to the 2-liter engine settlement. The proposal is that to reduce NOx emissions, $2.7 billion will be available nationwide, and this is over a period of time. The funds, the $2.7 billion is actually allocated by state, based primarily on diesel vehicle sales within each state. And California is to get 18% of that $2.7 billion. It's roughly around $381 million. And ARB has indicated that they will go through a public process to identify projects that will effectively reduce NOx emissions to make up for those excess emissions from the vehicles. And we have discussions actually with ARB on moving forward, and they do recognize the need for additional NOx reductions in South Coast and San Joaquin Valley. But that will still go through a public process. It may not be as discretionary as we would like it to be, but it is a public process that it'll be going through.
And Dr. Parker, if I could add also on the settlement agreement, the way it's structured, it requires each state to submit a plan for how they will be expending their funds. And then the settlement agreement also sets out certain specific categories of equipment replacement, primarily equipment replacement projects that it would approve. It sets up a trustee to manage this fund that will approve payments if they're consistent with what the settlement agreement specifies. And we did file comments on the proposed settlement agreement, among other things, suggesting some ways in which the types of projects could be broadened to include additional projects that would be effective in reducing NOx pollution, and also some comments specifically on the percent of the project that could be paid for, because the settlement makes a distinction between governmental and non-governmental projects and gives more payment to governmental projects, but it doesn't include special districts such as ourselves or even transit districts in the definition of governmental agencies. So we suggested that definition be broadened as well. So as Henry was saying, this settlement still needs to go to court to be approved, and we're hopeful that EPA and the ARB may take some of our comments into consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Obviously, as you guys now have elaborated, that's a very, I should say, something that if we are making a plan, depending and writing in our plan, certain percentages or certain dollar amounts, even in round figures, that we really have also on the other side made sure that those dollars can and will more likely be coming to us, can be used for those specific purposes as it relates to what we're going to be doing. Because I think at the end, we can certainly say to whoever it may be, EPA on the federal level or CARP at the state level, that we didn't get the funds that we had asked for, that was promised to us. So therefore, some of these things that we're talking about have not been achieved because of a lack of funds, and we will have specific reasons to point to that. Okay. Any other?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm scared to death of this whole thing because I think everybody's job here is on the line, including mine, if this thing fails. So, I am not comfortable yet by a long shot with what's coming out of this this information. I think, for example, the Volkswagen settlement has got to be a long time in the future. I don't see those guys settling. Kurt, is that you there? We can't see. Everybody's so small. They look like I'm watching a cartoon show on the side.
I think it's Barbara.
Is that Barbara and Kurt?
Kurt's not here, Dr. Burke, I'm here, Barbara speaking.
Okay. How long do you think it is before the Volkswagen suit settles?
Well, as Henry was saying, part of it, there is a proposed settlement already reached between Volkswagen and EPA and CARB, and that is scheduled, I believe, to go to court in October. I don't have the exact date. So that should be approved fairly quickly, and that is the part that includes the $380 million for California that Henry was describing. There are other parts of the settlement, including other engines, which I don't have inside information on how long it would take that to settle, but in this initial settlement, it would seem to me they're setting precedent for how other parts of the case might be settled. I don't know if Henry has any more insight than I do.
Dr. Burke, it's our understanding that the settlement includes a provision that Barbara mentioned, that each state needs to submit a plan for how they will achieve those emission reductions with the monies they receive. And it's a very short time frame for those plans to be submitted to US EPA. And ARB indicated that they have some oversight with EPA on looking at these plans. And there are ramifications if plans are not submitted, what to do with the monies for those folks that do not submit a plan. So they do want to move quickly. My understanding is that the funding will be over a period of time, but they do want those plans, action plans in very quickly.
Dr. Burke, I
I
would,
don't the settlement agreement, from what I understand, is between CARB, EPA, and Volkswagen. How do we get tied in there?
we get tied into the settlement by providing comment to ARB primarily. So we're in discussions with ARB on the nature of the projects that would be going forward, who would be authorized to handle the funds as the project moves forward. But what I was going to say, Dr. Burke, is that we certainly recognize the importance of the financing plan, and that's why we're working on a separate plan in addition to the AQMP. And we recognize that the financing plan has to move concurrently with the progression of the AQMP. And what I would suggest is that at our next committee meeting, we present you with the draft action plan, the committees, and apprise the board as we're developing it. What Dr. Fine was.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay, we will do so. Dr. Fine was just providing a summary of where we are and how it relates to the overall AQMP.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go right ahead.
I spoke with some of our CARB staff yesterday in preparation for the CARB meeting next week. And we talked about the issue of incentive and where that money is going to come from. ARB cannot advocate for legislation for incentive funding. We have to do that. We can do that, and we need to be working on that. But just so everyone understands, ARB as a part of the administration cannot advocate for incentive funding. That's our job.
I'll also mention that in terms of the AQMP, the emission reductions that are.
Why?
Sorry. Go ahead.
They don't have the authority.
They're
I
precluded, I
guess
think,
they
by
don't have the authority. They're part of the administration. Let's Barbara answer that.
Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it's because all the executive agencies are under the umbrella of the governor, and so they don't take positions on their own. That's been what we've been told in the past when we've talked about lobbying for legislation.
Okay.
And I was just going to reiterate that the emission reductions in our plan that are committed to, that are anticipated to come about through some of these incentive programs, is a commitment by CARB also to achieve those reductions in our area. So they should have as much incentive as we do to direct those funds to where they're most needed in the most cost-effective way.
That's right, because we have to submit a state implementation plan to the US EPA. And so that's part of this process. I mean, if we're going to get this approved, we've got to be able to fulfill the obligations both at the CARB level and at our level. The sticking point will be to get the federal EPA on board with this, with those sources that they control. I'm not sure where we are with that. I don't know, maybe staff can comment whether railroads, ships, and we're getting any headway with those kinds of things.
So EPA will be faced with the same challenge in terms of lobbying for funds. And this was something that I dealt with directly when we were launching DERA. We couldn't lobby Congress for funds, but we could answer questions. So what we actually did was work with the Puget Sound Air Quality with Dennis McLaren as the lead on moving forward on a lot of the requests. And then as congressional members had questions, then EPA can weigh in. So there was a lot of coordination in the same way that we're in discussions with Richard Corey and staff at ARB about coordination in terms of our ability to be out front, to advocate and to push. They understand what it is that we're asking for, and they're basically preparing to provide the responses that they know are going to come. EPA is in the same position, that as they're being queried by congressional members, they can say, yes, we've looked at the data analysis, yes, that funding will provide those emission reductions. So it is a coordination, but the real challenge is for us to be able to take the lead and coordinate amongst those other parties as we go forward.
This seems to me to be a battle between the strategies that we've chosen and the ones that our board will be asked to vote on, and that is regulatory vis-a-vis that of incentive. Because that's where we are. We're somewhere in the middle between that. More heavily now looking at incentive kind of funding in order to be able to reduce the emission loads, because we have no control over what those numbers themselves are as it relates to the emissions reductions that we must achieve. And how we're going to get there is a method. And that is a thing that I think what I hear Dr. Burke has been saying, that we're going to really go down the road and say that it's going to be heavily weighted on incentives and not on regulations. That we're not going to be going back to our industries and asking them to do more, to reduce more of the emissions than we have to. Otherwise, our state implementation plan, as Mrs. Mitchell was saying, could be rejected. Could be rejected to the extent itself that the likelihood of us being able to achieve the objectives that we want to achieve through the incentive base is not going to be there. So I think this is a very important, and as we all know, this is a very important position right now, because by the time we send it to the state, we don't want to get a rejection. We want to get an approval so that we can basically continue down that road and have some degree of certainty, more than a 50-50 shot, that we're going to be able to achieve some of these incentives. Rather than having to go back and resort to more heavily related regulatory reforms. That's my comments.
Dr. Parker, I would just
Any
add
further?
is that it is a very fine balancing act that we're being tasked to do. But the fact of the matter is we need a strong regulatory approach to implement the incentive program. The regulatory approach provides certain sectors with certainty with regards to the need for those type of technologies. And so in some ways, we're looking at driving technology and making sure that we have the ability to pull that technology forward. The other aspect that we have to be cautious about is that not only does ARB look at our submittal, but so does EPA. And EPA will be looking at, have we implemented all feasible measures? And we have to be able to answer the question with regards to feasible measures, how we're addressing those measures. So the balance that we're talking about is what we're hearing in the comments. And that's what Dr. Fine was alluding to, is that there are those that are saying we should be doing more on the regulatory side to provide perhaps greater certainty. There are perhaps others who are saying that we need to just provide more incentives and not do so much on the regulatory side. And that's where we're going to try to find that balance of providing regulations that meet the requirements under the Clean Air Act and yet don't put a tremendous burden on our industry. But we do have to recognize that as there are other things that are being looked at both from EPA and from ARB, we just have to be cognizant of what they are. And I think, Henry, you had another comment you wanted to add?
I do. Thank you, Ms. Nastri. The one thing that we stated in our mobile source measures is that they're meant to help implement the state mobile source strategy. There are several measures in the state strategy that are termed further deployment of cleaner technologies with no definitive approach or specific approach, as you say, to how those emission reductions will be achieved. ARB indicated that for these measures, they're looking at a combination of activities and actions. The first one being incentives programs. Second, developing regulations as new technology, near zero emission technologies are commercialized and deployed in a wider sense. They can look at regulations at that point. Third and fourth are actually quantification of actions and activities that are not quantifiable at this time, namely operational efficiencies that are occurring in the industry. If there are ways to quantify that will help reduce that emission reduction. And lastly, the new technologies of intelligent transportation systems, autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, and how, if potentially what the emission reduction benefits are. So that those four approaches is what ARB is talking about. ARB actually lists us as well as EPA as an implementing agency for those measures. And so staff can develop this set of mobile source measures that you see in the draft plan, which includes facility-based measures, other activities to reduce mobile source emissions that our agency has an ability to do. And this will help implement those further deployment measures. ARB indicated that they are committed to getting those reductions. So they are actually the ones that are on the hook to do that. But at the same time, they do list us as an implementing agency. So what staff has done is provided more certainty to those measures by offering or proposing these measures that you see in the AQMP itself. So they really complement ARB's approach, and we believe that with our measures and ARB's measure, we can truly eliminate the black box and move forward from that point.
And just one thing to add before we move on is that it has been staff's intent over this entire process, and it continues to be staff's intent to include in the AQMP every feasible regulatory option available to us at this time. And we've gotten a lot of comments on some other ideas that we may have missed, and we're looking at that right now to see if we can include even more on the regulatory side. And there's federal and state requirements that we do just that. So in terms of, whether there's an option that is, doesn't rely on incentive funding at all, at this point, staff feels that that really looks unfeasible. It's very difficult to be able to bring about this amount of change on pure regulation alone. So the regulations help set up the technologies that need to be developed and commercialized, and then the incentives come in when you need to advance that deployment and fleet turnover and equipment turnover to meet some of our targets that are coming up much sooner than those regulations will fully take effect. So we'll get back to the presentation. I think we covered incentive funding pretty well. I just mentioned the last thing is that we have had comments that, if we do have that shortfall, we need some kind of meaningful backup plan. Moving on, and again, these are just, I'm trying to summarize the comments we've received. These are not staff's opinions, or staff is not saying we agree or disagree with these comments. These are just trying to summarize the letters that we have received. We got a lot of comments on this idea of fair share, which really means at the federal level and the state level and the local level, are we going to be able to achieve the reductions under our primary control? And we have a lot of support in letters that CARB and EPA need to do their fair share. That's not a new concept. And that a robust mobile source strategy is key to attainment because the stationary sources have already reduced their emissions dramatically. And this is true, but the mobile sources have also reduced their emissions dramatically and will continue to do so in the future. So the ratio of stationary to mobile changes over time, but we have comments saying we should focus primarily on mobile, which we obviously have to, given that they make up the majority of emissions. On the other side, we get comments that we must continue our stationary source reduction efforts. That is what is under AQMD's primary authority, and we need to continue those programs and get reductions wherever we can, no matter how small, and that this will help address impacts to the low-income communities that might be around some of these facilities. There's no comments on this slide. I can move on. The next slide talks about technology, and this gets back to some debates that have occurred over the past couple AQMPs on zero versus near zero technology, or our general policy that we're fuel neutral or technology neutral as long as we can get the emission reductions we need. On one side, we're getting comments that they support the flexibility of a technology and fuel neutral policy, that regulations should all be emissions based and not technology based, and also comments that some of the technology that we talk about in the plan may not yet be market ready, to be included in control measures or subsequent short-term regulations. We also are getting comments on the other side that there's a lot of zero emission technology that's available now, and that the reliance on what we call low NOx or ultra low NOx technology and on natural gas and fossil fuels is short-sighted, and that we should be thinking longer term towards a zero emission future. And work that we do in the short term, utilizing low NOx technology and natural gas or other fossil fuels, is just perpetuating, is delaying that. So this is a pretty stark difference we're getting in the comment letters on both sides of this, and it's something that we've been meeting with all the stakeholders to try to get more information about their concerns. Any comments on this? Just moving on. Another very controversial area, as you know, are what we have termed our facility-based measures, and these are our MOB 01 through 04 and our EGM 01. So these are essentially our authorities that exist under indirect sources or our fleet rules. We have, on one side, we have a lot of comments that even oppose the current approach, which looks at a collaborative effort to try to achieve emission reductions through agreements, enforceable agreements, and being able to get credit for emission reductions from facilities such as rail yards and ports and airports and development sites and warehouses. But what we've also said is that if that approach is not working, then we can possibly move into regulation. So we're getting comments that's questioning our legal authority in these areas in the first place, that it's not necessary to meet attainment, that strong opposition to any type of facility cap or performance targets, opposition to any type of mitigation fee that increase housing costs, which is what they have. They already have that rule in the San Joaquin Valley, and a strong preference not to restrict local jurisdictions' land use authority. And obviously we're precluded from doing that, but there's a perception that some of these ISR rules will have that effect. On the other side of this argument, we're being told that we should make full use of our indirect source rule authority in this plan, make full use of whatever fleet rule authority we have, that this regulatory approach is necessary, and that we need to require a zero emission under that regulatory approach for rail yards, cargo handling, and other categories. And I will say we're working with CARB on some of the zero emission options in their strategy that might be some additional opportunities. But again, this is another issue where we're kind of in the middle of two sets of comments that are pretty strong on either side. Happy to discuss this issue, or we can move on. Okay, so somewhat related to this, but a little bit broader, is we have a lot of measures in the plan that don't have emission reductions associated with them. They're being termed TBD measures or to be determined. These measures, we've done this in past plans over the past several decades, because there's just some measures that we definitely want to work on that definitely could achieve emission reductions, but we can't quantify what they are today. Or they might overlap with another measure and we don't know which approach is going to actually achieve them, but we can't double count those measures. Or there are things like outreach and education that you'll never be able to quantify emission reductions, but they're definitely things we need to work on. So there's a whole set of TBD measures, and we get a lot of comments on these, and we did in the last plan as well. So if we're not quantifying emission reductions, we get comments that just eliminate them, they're not needed in the plan. If we're going to retain them, we should clarify the purpose. Again, we're working on that. Separate them from the quantified measures, and you can call them something else if they're uncommitted, they require further development and evaluation, but we're not necessarily committed to implement. And again, that gets into what gets submitted to EPA or not EPA. A lot of the comments on these TBD measures are related to the last topic, because our ISR, our facility-based measures, are also TBD. So these comments overlap with those last comments. Our response to this essentially is that we try to make this plan comprehensive in terms of a blueprint for staff's work over the next 3, 5, 10 years. So if there are actions that staff is going to take that could achieve emission reductions, we want to be very clear to the stakeholders and the board and staff of the directions we need to move. Some of them, we think we can get emission reductions that are real. We just need to complete some technical assessments before we can get there. And the other thing these measures do is if there are shortfalls in some of the other approaches that do have quantified reductions, and we move in this direction with these that don't have quantified reductions but achieve reductions, then we can make up for their shortfalls. We can also make up for we have reasonable further progress requirements and other requirements under the Clean Air Act to make progress. And if we miss some milestones based on other measures, reductions achieved under some of these measures could be substituted. So that's why it's a very important, think of it as a kind of a backup to some of the other measures in the plan. And then there's a whole set of other comments that were, are major comments, but are, just in the interest of time, we're not going to go into too much detail. One of them is on reclaim. As you know, in our measure CMB05, we have committed to another 5 tons per day reduction in reclaim in the 2031 timeframe. And we list a whole series of potential things we need to look at in the reclaim program going forward. Since we've released that, and in our working groups recently, we have, broached the subject of whether reclaim has outlived its useful life and whether there could be a sunset sometime in the future. So our comments have come from both sides. One is don't make any commitments. We're still implementing the last shave. How could you possibly ask for more reductions, even if it is further off in the future? And on the other side, we're getting comments, just sunset the program, it's not working, command and control, period. So again, that measure's being worked on to try to address some of those comments. We have measures and we have support for the measures that look at the beneficial use of non-refinery flare gas. There's comments to include a requirement for solar hot water heaters and new construction or at point of sale. We have a comment to eliminate diesel backup generators and new fossil fuel power plants. I'm not sure we have the authority to eliminate new fossil fuel power plants. Comments that the plan does not address odors. We're adding some discussion on odors in our Appendix 1 and some of the other chapters, but obviously this plan is not addressed at odors, it's addressed at federal standards. There's some concerns regarding the details of the modeling and our ozone modeling projections, support for our public outreach and education measures, and then comments that particulate matter in outdoor air in Southern California are not associated with mortality in Southern California, and some of you may have seen some of those comments come through. So that concludes kind of a broad summary of the comments. We did get a few more comments after this was developed and provided to the committee, and there's one other issue I wanted to touch on in terms of timing. There's comments on both sides of this. There's comments that from the industry side and from chambers of commerce and from other cities that the timeline's pretty tight. We have released most of the documents. There's still kind of the second half of the socioeconomic report that we're still working on. We're really trying to get this revised draft out, but it would really need to go out in the next week or so in order to have enough time for just another 30-day comment period and to be able to get a 30-day package together for in November for the December board meeting. And we've committed to having enough time for public review. So we've got comments from the business side that they would like some more time. We've also got comments from the environmental community side. They would like to have some more time to work with us on some of these measures. And right now, staff is working towards December as hard as we can, but it is a very tight time schedule, and we anticipate continued comments that the review times are going to be limited. So I just wanted to bring that up for discussion, perhaps. There is, I think we're okay if there's a bit of a delay in terms of
35 years ago today.
I think we're okay if there's a bit of a 30 to 60 day delay in terms of timing with EPA and CARB. Again, we want to give people the time they need to review the documents, but again, staff is working on the schedule that's been presented to the board and the committee before, but those comments will likely continue. So that, again, that's another topic of discussion. And if you want more details on the schedule and how tight it is, we can get into a little more detail. So that concludes my presentation.
Dr. Fine?
Yep.
I would, one of the, and I don't want to take authorship for this because it was really Dr. Burke's idea about the water heaters. We only have them at the point of sale for new construction. Why don't we do it for not only new constructions as we do for a lot of other things that has incentivized people who want to change their water heaters out and get new ones and give some kind of rebates or some kind of incentives in order for that to happen? Because we're talking about millions and millions and millions in that regard, to whatever extent that it would be, recognizing that many of the water heaters themselves are natural gas, but we do have some reduction. I don't know to what extent that reduction itself would be on the thousands, but it certainly could make a difference if we could utilize some incentive programs for that. You know, we're doing it for blowers. You know, right now we're doing it for lawnmowers. We're doing it for a lot of other things that is not necessarily just on new construction per se. So that's a comment that I would have to supplement the ones that you just had under other, comments about the solar water heaters.
So Dr. Parker, if I could clarify a little bit, we actually, in our measures that are in our draft plan that's out, have included such incentive programs for zero emission hot water heating. The comments we're getting is that you should regulate. You should have a requirement that either in new construction or point of sale of a house or for new sales of hot water heating equipment that we should move towards zero emission. And a bit of a challenge that we have with that is both on the incentive side and on the regulation side, that when you do the math, the cost effectiveness is not as good as some of the other measures we can undertake in terms of expenditure of incentive dollars or cost effectiveness of regulation in terms of where we can get the NOx reductions. But that doesn't mean that we're not strongly considering the comments we have received on that on all sides. So Henry'd like to add something.
I just want to add that for EGM01, we have indicated to the Building Industry Association that under the approach that we want to take to work with the industry on these measures in the beginning to identify actions, this is one action developers can initiate automatically. And if there is a way to credit that, then we can do that under EGM01. So all these stationary source measures and facility-based measures have some complementary approach to them. So looking at the bigger picture and not looking in silo, we think all these things make sense. And to create a more of a collaborative approach to looking at emission reductions.
Can't hear you, Dr. Burke.
Is he talking to us?
We can't hear you, Dr. Burke, if you're talking to us.
No, I'm not talking to you.
Oh.
I was talking to Paul. I was talking to Paul.
Sorry.
I was trying to make you guys big enough so I could see you.
Well, my personal view is that requiring water heaters to be solar water heaters to be installed at the time you sell the house is the wrong approach, and I would oppose that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go right ahead.
I just want to note that our AQMP and the SIP, the SIP, are on CARB's agenda for January. So I hope that if you're going to delay this, we're working with CARB on that, how that works and how it gets move forward on agendas.
We have talked to CARB senior staff on this issue, and so they're very aware of the challenges that we have. That's why, as Dr. Fine said, we're working diligently to stay on schedule. I think the fact that we have additional information that I think is going to take a lot of review time we're hearing across the board that they want that additional review. I would say that probably by the end of the month, we'll have a better sense. That's why I say we're trying to do it, but we're trying to also recognize that everyone wants to have the opportunity to provide that review. I think that if we do a delay, 30 days isn't going to be sufficient, to be honest, because that puts us right in the middle of the holiday season. So we would almost need another 60 days. So it's something that we're looking at. We're trying to stay on schedule, but just want to make sure that you're aware that we may have to move forward with that delay. From an EPA perspective, we'll be okay. We don't want to put it out much further than that. We do have a requirement. I think we have tried to be discreet in pushing the issue, but moving forward in a diligent fashion.
Okay. Well, any further questions by any of the board members?
No.
Are there any comments on this update from anyone in the public there at CCA?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Step forward and give us your name for the record and go right ahead.
Sure. This is Jim Stewart from the Sierra Club, and I'm actually presenting some comments that were already submitted to everybody by a coalition of what we call ourselves the Clean Air Advocates for Southern California. They include the Coalition for Clean Air, Earth Justice, Sierra Club, the Center for Community Action, Environmental Justice, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Communities for a Better Environment, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. We are highly sympathetic with the task that's been laid upon the South Coast Air District, the staff and the board, relative to mobile sources. Because let's face it, our CARB and EPA have most of the authority. So it really puts the squeeze on you. However, as we have detailed in our comments, we believe that you have not exercised all of your authority. The first thing that really upset us is the fine print relative to MOB 1, the emission reductions at the ports, in which in the fine print you said that you're going to do away with the backstop rule. And I really appreciated what Dr. Burke was saying, which is that all of us are scared to death that this plan might fail. And you have a proven method in place already, the port backstop rule, that will help prevent the ports from failing. So you cannot justify removing of that port backstop rule. And we hope that the board will go along with that. And we're depending upon you, Dr. Parker and Dr. Burke, to also insist that the staff require the port backstop rule, or we're all in trouble.
So could we have staff respond to that?
Yes, we'd like
I'm
that.
aware of this issue, and I have brought it up with our staff.
So the backstop rule was in the last couple AQMPs. It was to backstop the emission reductions that the ports were working on in terms of their clean air action plans. And Henry's going to interrupt me if I say something wrong. But a lot of those emission reductions that came about were early emission reductions. So the benefits of those are kind of running out. The regulations and fleet turnover has kind of caught up to most of those committed reductions. So a lot of those have occurred. The bulk of those have occurred. The other point was we had this measure in the last plan, and it was submitted to EPA, and it was actually, this measure was disapproved. It was not approved by EPA in that plan. So that's one reason we're trying to take.
If EPA has not taken action.
Didn't take action
on
yet.
IND-01. and has not taken action on
Yeah,
it.
they're not disapproved, but they approved other parts of the plan, but they didn't take action on that part of the plan. So there's some concerns at the EPA level. So these things have led us to, consider some other approaches that might get those emission reductions just like that would have. We're still waiting on the Clean Air Action Plan 3.0 and working with the ports on that to see what they're projecting into the future that they can do. But the landscape has changed a little bit since we had proposed it in the past. But we take the comment seriously. So,
Just to add a little bit.
Dr. Fine,
Yeah.
maybe I'm having a mental lapse here. I seem to recall that the backstop rule that for the ports were there in case they didn't meet certain, set numbers that had been established by a certain date specific, without us having to have certain regulatory issues mandating that they do certain things. And is that the same rule that we're talking about, Mr. Stewart?
Correct.
And you said that EPA did not allow us to have, or have not stated that we could have that particular
there,
rule in place?
Henry?
Dr. Parker, this is Henry. I just want to clarify that there are two backstop rules that are submitted to EPA.
Okay.
One was from the 2007 AQMP to help meet the 2023 ozone standard. The second one was part of the 2012 AQMP, and that's control measure IND-01, which is a backstop rule to help meet the 2014 PM 2.5 standard. And because of changes in emissions and regulatory actions that have occurred on the state level and on the federal level, a lot of the reductions that were to be achieved under those previous plans have been achieved. And as such, there's no longer a need to backstop those older numbers. The 24-hour PM 2.5 standard from the 2012 plan has been now set to be attained in 2019. So that measure in the 2012 plan is outdated at this point. And that's why EPA has not taken action on IND-01. EPA also indicated that when looking at a backstop to emission reduction commitments that are already in the SIP, that the backstop measure will serve more, now use the word contingency rather than actual further emission reductions. So the only action at the ports that is still considered voluntary action is the vessel speed reduction program. All the other sources have a regulatory action by ARB. And as you know, the International Maritime Organization adopted Tier 3 standards for marine vessels. So all those things have been put in place. What we want to see from MOB-01 is to move forward to identify additional reductions beyond regulatory actions that the ports have an ability to affect with their tenants. And if those reductions are quantifiable, considered surplus, and can be shown to be permanent, similar to the vessel speed reduction, we want to recognize those emission reductions as part of the further deployment measures of ARB's strategy, and at the same time, put them in as part of a rate of progress demonstration to show to US EPA that we are moving towards attainment. And then in future AQMP revisions, we can reflect those emission reductions appropriately. So we're taking an approach that would be to look for more reductions rather than backstop what the commitments are today. And that's the approach we want to do. We have to indicate that the previous control measures, MOB-03 and the 2000 AQMP, that's the backstop measure for ozone for the ports. and IND-01 are really outdated. And because we submitted to US EPA, we have to indicate that those measures need to be replaced. And that's what we're proposing under this plan.
So moving forward, we understand the comment, because if there are commitments, even if they're voluntary by the courts moving forward, the comment is still valid that there needs to be some way to ensure that those emission reductions occur. So the approach that's in the plan as it exists now is start that process, work with those facilities, including the ports, to achieve those enforceable emission reductions, just like we would if we were starting a rulemaking to figure out what types of measures would occur. And if we cannot find an enforceable mechanism that meets EPA standards, if we cannot reach any agreement, then it turns immediately into what might not be called backstop anymore, but it could be some kind of facility-based measure in a regulatory form. But it may look different than the quote backstop rules that we have developed in the past.
Well, this is very helpful. Right. And maybe, Henry, if you can talk to Adrian, our lawyer, and that would be helpful, or Phil, because you know, I'm the messenger here, and you know, Adrian did the work on this. So thank you very much for that clarification. Now, the next point from our lawyer is fleet rules. And it's great that AQMD has authority over all government fleets, and even over fleets that are in contract with government agencies. And our evaluation of your plan shows that you are not implementing all of the fleet rule power that you have, and we're wondering if you're planning on increasing that in the next draft.
Barbara, can you speak to that?
So, Jim, I just have a question. Are you talking about extending the fleet rule concept to private fleets?
Well, private fleets that are under
to...
contract with the government agencies, isn't that allowed?
Well, in our view, it is. If it's an exclusive contract to the government agency, we would have authority under what the courts call the market participant theory to require local governments to require their contractors to use clean fleets. Now, the statute is somewhat limited in what I just addressed was a federal principle. We also have to have state law authority because, as you know, as a general rule, the Air Resources Board has authority over motor vehicles. So we have a specific statute, Health and Safety Code 40447.5, which authorizes us to adopt fleet rules. But what it says is that we can require when fleets of 15 or more are adding to or replacing vehicles in their fleets, that we can require them to use methanol equivalent vehicles. So it's somewhat, the statute is somewhat limiting and outdated because methanol is kind of a item from the past, and we'd like to go to zero emission at this point. So what we'd like to do is, if we are serious about getting complete zero emission vehicles, we would have to go to the legislature to get additional authority. But we could also allow, and we currently do in our existing rules, allow electric vehicles as a method of complying with our existing rules. It's just that the way the existing authority is written, we can't actually require it. We could extend our rules to to private fleets, but that would have to get that would have to get approved by CARB and submitted to EPA for a waiver of preemption if we were to do that for private fleets.
Well, we would love to support you on that.
Just to add to Barbara's comment, because the way the state law is written, that it would be at the time a fleet is acquiring new or expanding, that there's no requirement to mandate it. So the mandate is on purchasing at the time the fleet is ready to purchase. So we could not accelerate that schedule
I
under
see.
state law.
Uh-huh.
And what we found is that over the 16 years of implementation of fleet rules, local governments, municipalities have started to purchase alternative fuel vehicles. The waste hauling industry is almost all alternative fuel vehicles. And they indicated to us that they're happy with the product, and we indicated that we would like them to start buying the ultra-low NOx engines because they're now commercially available.
Right.
And they would be happy to participate in that. So we're evaluating whether we need to amend our fleet rules to go to the lower levels, the ultra-low NOx alternative fuel levels, because as Barbara mentioned, methanol is the standard, but we have been saying that the standard is the cleanest engine, alternative fuel engine available. And there's no question that they are buying that, and public entities are doing the same.
And you can go to zero now. I
And
mean, we can
do,
make garbage trucks that are zero, so let's go there.
And some
That's what we
have
would urge you.
indicated their interest in looking at those types of vehicles. So we are working very closely with them.
But we
Great.
can accelerate it through the car motor program, through incentive
Right, through
programs,
incentives.
and that's
where
been
we
very
accelerate.
effective.
So to your question,
Excuse me, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Supervisor Nelson has joined us at 10:05 this morning. Go right ahead.
so to your question of whether we're revising the measure that anticipated some amendments to fleet rules, we are adding clarification along the lines of the discussion that we just had. So.
Well, we look forward to that new language then. And then my final comment is on the indirect source rule, that you do have the authority over vehicle tractors like warehouses, and that we do not see that you're exercising your authority here, and that this is the key issue that we've been in, right? We've got to figure out every possible way to reduce this NOx, to make this 2023 deadline. And we believe that the indirect source rule application to these large warehouses is essential.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. Any further comments from anyone in the audience there?
Yes.
Okay.
It won't be anywhere near quite as long. Good morning, my name is Bill Lamar. I'm the Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance. The question that I had here, or comment, is the publication of comment letters. In looking at your website, I commented on this before, and I noticed from Dr. Fine's presentation, 64 comment letters have been received. I'm not sure that all 64 are on your website. I know the two that I wrote, one is a member of the AQMP advisory group and one is a member of the AQMP advisory council, don't appear on there. The date range seems to range from July 9th or July 19th to September 9, a full week ago. Both of my letters fall within that time range. And there may be some others, but I think my comments are relevant, as all comments should be. And I would urge you to update that or direct staff to update that. Thank you.
So just to respond,
Sure.
Our intent is as we receive comments on the AQMP, we are posting those online. Mr. Lamar is referring to a set of comments that we received on Appendix 1, which is this advisory council that is set up to review Appendix 1. And we did get several comments from the advisory council. And we are posting those as comments to the AQMP now, but they and I think they'll be up by the end of the day. But they were kind of a separate group. They didn't get posted in the same batch that we were posting all the other AQMP. So it was, just a matter of timing, and the intent is to post everything.
Yeah, that was one letter. There was one back in July timeframe that was made as a member of the advisory group, not the advisory council.
Okay. Well,
And I can send those to you again, but.
Please do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lamar. Any further comments?
I don't believe there are any more from here.
Okay. Supervisor Nelson, would you like to comment on any of the matters that we have had today or questions concerning, I assume that you have the actual report that Dr. Fine has already presented.
Yes, I'm in good shape. Thank you, Doc.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from anyone else? Well, we will then thank you very much, Dr. Fine and Barbara and Hogan. We were to our next written reports, Rule 2202, activity reports. Anyone has any questions about those? Monthly report on environmental justice initiatives, the CEQA reports. Comments? Hearing none, then they will be accepted. Right, Clark?
No
None
comments,
here.
sir.
There's none here, yeah.
Okay. All right, then, any objection to having those received and recorded as such for our committee? Any other matters that anyone would like to bring before the board, before the committee today? Any regular public comments from CC8?
None here.
Okay. Then we will adjourn our meeting, then no further comments. To our next meeting in October 21st, 2016. Everyone have a lovely weekend, and thank you very much for coming.